Good morning. We're on Menachot 64a, three lines from the top, and we're discussing Rabbi Shmuel's view that you should avoid extra work on Shabbos beyond what is not absolutely required, extra malacha. And the Gemara is trying to find a corresponding view that agrees with Rabbi Shmuel. We rejected one already. Three lines from the top. Elam Rabba, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Chanina, Skana Amar Davar Echad. If you're looking for someone who says the same thing as Rabbi Shmuel, or has the same idea, but in a different case, really, it's Rabbi Chanina. It's not. We have a Mishnah. Rabbi Chanina is going to Omer. B'Shabbos niktzar biyachid. So was talking about the Omer. The Omer was a grain offering and from barley, and it had to be reaped on the second day of Pesach. Now, what happens if the second day of Pesach falls on Shabbos? You have to do it anyway. But what about the details? So, b'Shabbos niktzar biyachid. Ordinarily, you would have three people doing the reaping of the new barley, but on Shabbos you only use one person. B'magal echad, and you'd have several scythes, or sickles, actually, is the translation here. Um, and on Shabbos you would only use one ubakupachas and carry it in not in multiple baskets but in one basket. Ubachol, but if on the regular weekday b'shlosha b'shalosh kupos b'shalosh magals, use three people, three baskets, and three sickles. But the rabbis say echad Shabbos v'echad chol b'shalosh kupos b'shalosh magals. No, you do it the same way on Shabbos or on a weekday. So doesn't this indicate that Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim tries to minimize Shabbos? So wouldn't he say the same thing in our case? So Gemara says, wait a minute, Milo Kam Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim Hasam Kevin Dafshar Lo Tarchinan. But Rabbi Chanina, in that case of the Omer, he specifies that since you can do it with fewer, with minimizing the malacha done. You can have only one person do it instead of three people do it. It still works. But so wouldn't he say the same thing here? Um, um, that you could bring the omer from how much grain do you use to get the flour? Um, you should use three saw, not five saw. So, because yesterday we said that Rabbi Shmuel says that usually you'd use five saw of grain to produce a series haif of flour, uh, but if it's Shabbos, then you would only use three, and you could still manage to eke out in a series. So, isn't that the same idea as Rabbi Chanina? Where says we might, maybe not. Dilmad kan lo kam Rabbi Shmuel hacha ela deleka pursume milsa. Maybe Rabbi Shmuel would only say in our case that why would you still use? Really on Shabbos you should use only one person, but because you want to publicize that it's being done on Shabbos, you would use three people. And how does that work? Or why is that? Because what I usually think of as the Karaites, but there was a sect in the time of the Mishnah called the Baitusim, and they held that Macharas HaShabbos. When do you bring the Omer offering? On Macharas HaShabbos, the day after the Shabbos. Now we interpret that as the day after the holiday, the Chag of Sukkot. So in other words, the day after the first um, first day of Pesach. But the Baitusim said, no, Machras Shabbos is literally Shabbos. So you wait till the first Shabbos in Pesach and then do it on the next day. Um, so to emphasize that we don't hold like the Baitusim, we're going to do it on Shabbos. If Pesach is on Friday, we do it on Shabbos, and demonstrate as much as possible that yes, we're doing this on Shabbos. So we don't want to minimize in that case the Chilul Shabbos. We want to publicize it. Aber hast du die Resümee Milsa, Ema Karabanas für Iname. Ad kan lo kamar Chanina Skana Koni Hasa. Maybe Rabbi Chanina, when he's talking about the how many people use the ibachad ibishlosha sarchavo mis avid kil chasa. Look, whether you're doing it with one person or three people, the mizbeach is supposed to get this offering. But here, whether you start with 5 bushels of grain or 3 bushels of grain, in the end, the mizbeach is going to get it. Sasir Yisrael, Emak Rabbanan Sfirlei. So maybe we'd say no, like the Rabbanan, use the three. Alam Ravashi, so Ravashi has a different parallel. We're still looking for a parallel to Rabbi Shmuel's view. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Amar Davar Echad. It's Rabbi Yossi who has a similar theory. It's not Bein Shen Yerabal Leil, Bein Shalom Yerabal Leil. Here we're talking about the witnesses who see the new moon. So whether they see it clearly or not, they have to come. Now their testimony might be rejected, probably will be rejected by the Beis Din if they're going to say they didn't really see it clearly. So why would they come on Shabbos? Rabbi Yossi, because there's a blanket permission. Rabbi Yossi Omer Imner Balil Emechal Shabbos. If it's seen clearly, um, then you do not you're not Mechal Shabbos because you can assume that somebody else must have seen it too, and somebody who's closer to the Sanhedrin will pick up the slack and will go and testify, and there would be less Shabbos desecration. So Milo Maria Hasam came the Efshar Tachinan. So it seems like Rabbi Yossi's theory is, since it's possible for the mitzvah of the new moon being the testimony being offered, it's going to happen. Therefore, you should not. It's going to happen anyway, so don't add to the Chilul Shabbos by allowing people who didn't see it clearly to be Mechal Shabbos to come to the court. Hanami came in the Esher or Tachina, so maybe the same thing would apply here with the Omer. So Gemara says we might, maybe not. Dilma ad kan lo kamar rishon hacha elo delei kanim seis ata machshil liasid lavo. Um, in the case of Rabbi Shmuel, of the Omer, right? Then you don't have a concern that what's going to happen in the future. How are people going to react to this rule, right? Aval hasam denim seis ata machshil liasid lavo. In the case of where of the new moon testimony. So if people get the idea that you can let it go, you saw it clearly, so it's fine. Somebody else will do it. This idea of somebody else will do it will mean that if this attitude takes hold, then everybody will say somebody else will do it in the future, and maybe we won't have any new moon testimony. So maybe that's why he says, "Go ahead, be Michal Shabbos, even though you saw it clearly." Um, so inami, or you could say, in the case of the new moon, there's no um, it's not a requirement for the mizbeach, so you cannot be docha Shabbos. Here there is. You need this grain for the mizbeach. Nitna Shabbos lichos, and and we know that you can be mechal Shabbos for it. You can override Shabbos. Ema karbanos firle. Maybe he holds like the Rabbana that once since it's a mizbeach requirement, and we know that you can override Shabbos, so go ahead. The permission has been given. Afilu, yeah. Uh, Emokrom is really okay. Itmar. Shachat shtei chatos shel tzibur ve'eno sarich ala achas. What happens if you have two chatos, communal chatos? For example, the on a moed, right, on a holiday, there's a seir for chatos, and by mistake you did it twice, 2 goats, and you only needed one, right? Seir chatos echad. Amar Rabba, Vitem Rabbi Yami, Rabba or maybe Rabbi Yami said, Chayv al Ashniyot Pato al Harishona. You're, the second one um, is uh, is extra, right? And you're chayav um, for bringing something in the mikdash that you should not have. Um, um, but the first one is even if you end up getting the required atonement from the second one. So, for example, you slaughter these 2 animals, right? And the second one was superfluous, but then the first one is somehow disqualified, like you spilled the blood, and now you don't have the blood anymore to put on the mizbeach. So you can use the second one um, and you end up using the second one as the actual chatas. Even so, um, um, even so, you've still violated by bringing the second one in the first place because at the time it wasn't required. And also, rishon kahusha, or another alternative scenario other than the blood, spilling the blood, is it turns out that the the first one turned out to be weak, and so it was like so degraded or not degraded, but deficient, that it was disqualified. It's not a valid carbon. So the second one fills in for it. But even so, at the time that you did the shchita of the second one, you weren't aware of that. You thought at the time it was an incorrect decision. So the Gemara says, "Miyamar Rabba Hachi." Is that right? Is that really what Rabba said? V'amar Rabba. Rabba said somewhere else. Hayilufan shtei chatos. If you have two chatos offerings, echad shmein v'echad kusha. One was healthy and the other was weak. Shachat shmein v'achakach shachat kusha chayev. If you first slaughtered the healthy one and then you did the weak one as mistakenly as a chatos, as the same chatos, then the second one is definitely no good and chayav. Kachusha v'yachakach shmeina. But what if you first slaughtered the deficient one, and then you slaughter the healthy one, potter. Then the second one is actually required, and you're fine. So how come here Rabbah says that you're still chayav on the second one, even after the first one is found to be kakusha? Not only that, but you bring what we tell you is bring the healthy one and do that one lechatchila. So so then in the case where the first one was found to be weak, then why would Rabbah say that you're chayav for slaughtering the second one? So Gemara says you might say masami kahusha mikamaisa. Maybe we'll reinterpret the brisa or the Mishnah, and so Rabbah actually said that you're off the hook for the slaughter of the first one. He didn't say anything about the second one. In this Mishnah, I say Mahahi Rabbi Yami Amra, or um, maybe it wasn't Rabbah who said it. So yeah, it contradicts what Rabbah said, but it wasn't Rabbah who said it. Like we said in the first place, maybe it was Rabbi Yami who said it. So yeah, it turns out it was Rabbi Yami who said it. I only read in Ravashi. Nimseis harishana kahusha bivnei me'ayin mahu. What if the first one is found to be weak, like in its innards? Like it looks okay on the outside, but only after the shechita did you discover that it's not eligible. Mao. Basa machshavto azlinan v'gavrli sura komichamin. Do we go after what he was thinking? Now he didn't. The guy who did the shechita of the second one, he didn't know that the first one was no good yet. So then should he be chayav? Odilma basar masav azlinan, or do we go by the actual actions, like the actual reality? Because the reality is that the first one was no good. Turns out to be no good. So then retroactively, turns out that the second one was the right thing to do, to slaughter it. Amalei, Lavhainu de Rabba Barava. This is Machlokes of Rabba and Rabba Dietmar. Shama Shatava Tinok Bayam. Here's another case. You heard that a child was drowning in the river. Uparas Masud al Halas Dagim Dagim. And it's Shabbos, and you go fishing. You spread a net, okay? And you catch fish. Chayev. You're not allowed to trap on Shabbos. Lahalos Dagim Dagim Vitinok. But what if you spread your net to catch fish, but fortunately, your net caught the child and you saved the child? Rava Amar Chayev, Rava Amar Pater. So Rava says, doesn't matter. You weren't intending to save the child. You were intending to fish. It's wonderful that you saved the child, but you're still Chayev for trapping the fish on Shabbos. And Rava says, no. Since you caught the child, then the fish you caught are incidental to that, and you're fine. V'yad kan Rava lo kapater ela kevan neshama. And now, so now Rabbah would say Robert would say, you know why you're potter? Because you heard, as the case was presented, you knew that there was a child drowning in the river. So, Marina, no, so when you went fishing and you spread your net, you thought, you know what, it would be great if I need the fish, but it would be great if I caught the child and saved the child. So you did have an original intention when you started fishing that, maybe that it was permitted because the chance that you would catch the child permits you to put the net in the water. Avalo shamalo, but that implies that if you had no idea that there was a child drowning and you went fishing and you caught the child, that doesn't get you off the hook for intending to go fishing. Um, your intention was not a good one, was a one to be Michal Shabbos, so you should be chayav. So this looks like that same machlokas, right? It depends. The two views differ on whether it's your intention or your or the reality of your action. Vikadam, right? Another version of this conversation was Amarlai, how to Rabba Varava. Ravashi said to Ravina, this, like, before we said he proposed, maybe this is Rabba and Ravashi, and now in this version, he's like saying, definitely, this is the argument of Rabba and Ravashi. If you heard about the drowning child and you went fishing, if you only caught fish, you're chayav. Lahalos dagim alatina v'dagim. But if you went fishing and you rescued the child, Rabba Amar Pater, Rabba Amar Chayav. Rabba says you're off the hook because you rescued the child, and Rabba says no. Rabba says no. You had no idea that you were gonna that you wanted to catch fish. Rabba Amar Pater is Yilbasar Masav. So Rabba says you're okay because in the end, the reality is that you saved the child, so we'll let you off the hook. Rabba Amar Chayav is Yilbasar Machshavta. Rabba said no. You wanted to fish and you fished. That was a bad thing. You caught the child, Baruch Hashem, but you're still liable for fishing on Shabbos. Amar Rabba, Chola she'amduhu legrogras achas. You have a sick person, and the doctors say that he needs this much figs, right? So you have to go and you didn't have any figs in the house. You have to go and harvest some figs to save his life. So 10 people heard what the doctor said, and all 10 of them went out and cut a fig, but he only needed one fig. So Peturin, they're all patur because each one of them was trying to save his life. Afilu b'zeh, even if they act consecutively, and afilu kadam v'hivri berishona, and even if the guy ate the first fig, recovered or was out of danger, and then the people, the other 10 people were still going and cutting figs. They're still patur. Um, so, so we see that according to this statement of Rabbah, we go after the intention. By Rabbah, what if a sick person needs two figs? And there are two figs on two branches, and three figs on one branch. So which is the Haimina? Which one should you cut? Um, what are the considerations? Shtayim, I see on the chazulite. Really, he just needs two, so don't cut a branch that has three. Odilma shalosh ma'asina de kamamata katsira. Or maybe you should cut the branch that has the three figs because there's only one act of cutting, so you've got an extra fig, but you minimize the chil Shabbos. So pshita shalosh ma'asina. So Gemara says obviously you do the branch with the three. Da'adkan lo kamar rishon hasa mel duchim ma'id b'chila kamay katsira. When Rabbi Shmuel said about the Omer that um, yeah, when you limit the amount for eating, then you're also limiting the amount of reaping. There's a one-to-one correspondence. But in the case of the figs on the branch, if here where if you were to get two figs But you'd be having to cut two separate branches. Vaday shalosh ma'asina. So definitely go with the only single cut of the one branch with the three figs. Okay, next mission. Mitzvah Omer Lavim Lakarov. The ideal behavior for the Omer, for harvesting the Omer, is to find something close as possible to Yerushalayim. Lo bikar Yerushalayim, but if you didn't find anything ripe nearby, bring it from wherever you can find it. Masa Shabbat Omer Migagos Tzrifin. One time they had to go all the way to Tzrifin, which is I think up in the north. Ushtei alechem mibikasein socher, and the shtei alechem similarly they brought from a faraway place. So you can see from these case studies that case reports that if necessary you could go as far as you need to go in Eretz Yisrael to harvest the omer. Whereas is my tama. Why is it ideal to bring it from the neighborhood of Yerushalayim? Mishum Carmel. One possibility is because Aviv, when it describes the Omer, what kind of barley should you bring? Aviv, Kalui, Ba'esh, Geras, Carmel. Carmel means fresh. Um, so the fresher it is, the closer it is, the fresher it is when you get it to Yerushalayim. If you buy say mishum den mitzvahs, or you could say because why pass by a nearby field to go to a faraway field? You're passing up an earlier opportunity to do the mitzvah. Master Shua Omer Gagos Srifin. So the Mishnah had a case report where the Omer came from Gagos Srifin, Tadarabana, Kishatsaru Malchay Beis Chashvan Zelzah, when there was a civil war between the Chashmonaim monarchs. V'haya Hyrcanus mibachutz, v'Aristobolus mibifnim. Hyrcanus was inside Yerushalayim, and Aristobolus was outside Yerushalayim, was besieging it or attacking it. B'choyam v'yom hayu mishalshil lahem dinarin b'kupa umalin lahem tamidim. They were all committed to the operation of the Beis Hamikdash. So even though there was a siege, they would the inside people would lower some money in a basket, and the outside people would send the carbon tamid. There was a elder there who knew Greek wisdom. He had some education. Laws lahem b'chachmas Yivanis. He advised them with this wisdom. Amar lahem. He said, you know what? It's very nice that you want the Mizbeach to be operating like normal and have a carbon tamid every day, but as long as the merit of the carbon tamid accrues to them, you're not going to be able to conquer them, right? If you force them or if you make them unable to offer the carbon tamid, then God's favor will be removed from them. You'll be able to defeat them. So the next day they sent down the money in the basket. They sent up a pig, which obviously is not valid for the carbon. When the pig got halfway up the wall, not sipona b'choma, it stuck its toenails into the wall. V'nizdaza Eretz Yisrael arba me'as parsa. Like there was basically the whole land shook, which is I guess not a metaphor. What's the word I'm looking for? It's an idiom saying that this it was an earth-shaking event. And at that time they said no more, cursed. Anyone raising pigs in Eretz Yisrael should be cursed. And also no more studying this outside wisdom. And it was around about that time period that it occurred that the Omer came from Gagos Srifin, since there was no because I guess the understanding here is that the land shook for an area of 400 parsa, whatever that is. There was no crops to be found, and so they had to go further afield to find the crops. I guess after the siege was over. Kimata Omer, lo havi yadei mehecha ise Omer. So what happened? What happened was they didn't know where they could find the grain because all the local stuff had been ruined. Achruzo, they sent out an announcement. sent out a call for, hey, where can we find some grain? Also, harsha. So some deaf person came along. Osif chada yada aigra v'chada yada atzrifa. He was a deaf mute, so he couldn't speak, but he knew where to find grain. So he put one hand in the basket and one hand on the roof. So gag tzrifin. Um, he was pantomiming or playing charades with them. That if you go to Gagos Tzrifin, you can find grain. Amalu Mordechai, Miika Duchta Deshmei Gagos Tzrifin. So Mordechai, one of the elders on the court, um, said, "Oh, he's playing the charades game. He's like, oh, what's this guy doing with the basket and the roof? Maybe there's a place called Gagos Tzrifin or Tzrifin Gagos." So they looked it up, and sure enough, there's a place called Gagos Tzrifin, and this is what he was trying to communicate to them. And when it came time for Shavuos and they wanted to harvest some wheat, I didn't know where to find wheat because of the local disruption of the supply of the harvest. Achrus, so that done an announcement again. Also, Gavra Harsha, that same deaf mute guy came along. Also, he pantomimed one hand on his eye and one hand in a sichra, apparently a door latch, right? Armon Mordechai, so the same Mordechai says, Umika duchta d'shmei ein socher or socher ayin. This is what he's trying to tell us, that you can find wheat in a place called either Ein Socher or Socher Ayin Bad. And sure enough, they found a place called Ein Socher, and there was wheat there. That's what he was trying to tell them. Another story about this Mordechai. There were three women brought three birds' nests. Right, they had to bring a carbon of birds, and they brought each one brought a nest of birds. They use three different terms for why they had to bring the carbon. One says because I was a zav, one says because I was a yam, and one says because I had my ona. Savar mina zivasi zava mamash. So they thought that when the one who said zivasi meant that she was actually a zav and not just a um, um, what was the other? I don't remember what they're actually bringing. The um, Oh yeah, so there's different situations that a woman can need to bring a bird sacrifice. So the first one is a zava. The second one, miyamasi, who's a liyamasi mamish, meaning um, like a river of blood. Um, and it could also be a zava. And the third one, le'onasi, that again, it's like the time she has reached the end period of the time of completing the zav process. So all of them um, were bringing karbanos for zav, for being a zava, and so one chatas and one olah. Amar Mordechai Shema bezov sikna. Maybe. Um, so maybe these aren't required sacrifices. Maybe it's not that she was actually a zav, but maybe she was just having her regular period, but uh, she had some concern that it was going to be dangerous or something dangerous was happening to her. It happened to be at that time, and she brought this carbon as a voluntary toda. Um, and Shema Bayam, Sikna, maybe the one says Liyamasi is not talking about blood. She's talking about she was on an ocean voyage and it was dangerous. And so she's, again, bringing a carbon toda. And the third one, who said Shema Be'ena Sikna, maybe when the third one said Le Onasi, um, Onasi, she's not talking about her period. She's talking about her eye, right? The word is similar. Ona and ayin maybe she was talking about she had an eye infection that was dangerous, and now she's bringing a toda. And the chulhu olos ninu. So these are all carbon toda, and they shall be treated like an ola. Badok v'yashkoch. And they checked, and sure enough, that's what they found. That was the case. Um, and this is what the Mishnah says, Pesachia al Kinin ze Mordechai. When we had the Mishnah refers to a person called Petachia who was in charge of the nests of birds, like he was in charge of um, the bird offerings brought by Azav. Zeh Mordechai. His real name was Mordechai Lamanik Shmo Pesachia Pesach Devarim V'Darshan V'Yodei B'Shivim Lashon. He was called Pesachia because he had he opened investigations. He has not investigations, but he opened up the mystery of, or um, the uncertainty of um, things that were things that needed to be interpreted. So basically, he was wise enough to interpret and lay bare the facts of what was going on here. Um, so the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. Kula Sanhedrin Nama Yad Yeshivim Lashon. So we said two things about this Mordechai, that Poseach Torim Darshan, and he knew 70 languages. So the Gemara says, well, what? All of the Sanhedrin knew 70 languages. So how do you know that this Pesachia is that this one called Pesachia is Mordechai? Could have been any of the Shivim Zakanim on the Sanhedrin. The only people who are eligible for the Sanhedrin, they have to be wise, Balei Mar, they have to be look good looking, Balei Koma, and they have to have stature, physical stature. Bali Zikna, they have to have reached a respectable age. Can't put teenagers on the high court. Bali Kshafim, and they have to know some magic because they have to be able to judge magicians, sorcerers. V'yonim shivim lashon, and they have to know all the languages. Shalote Sanhedrin Shamas Mipiyat Turgaman, so that they can hear testimony directly. If they know all the languages, then whoever comes to testify, they can understand directly. They won't need an interpreter. Um, so so why are you saying that Pesachia is this particular Mordechai? It could be anybody on the court. Ella to have a Bail Lishna Vidarish. Um, so this Pesachia, he had some other unique thing. Not only did he speak all 70 languages, but he was a linguist, right? He could mix up languages and understand. So somebody was talking, a dialect that was made up of different of pieces of different languages, he could understand it. That was what unique about him. So all the 70 Zakanim could understand the individual language. This guy could understand polyglots, I guess. V'hainu dichsiv b'Mordechai bilshan. And so the Mordechai who is referred to in the book of Nehemiah, he was also called Bilshan, because that's Bilashon, like mixing up languages. He was able to understand mixed languages. So that's how we identified this Pesachia specifically as this one Sanhedrin member, um, Mordechai. And we'll stop here for today and pick this up tomorrow.
Thank you. Have a good day.